Alrighty, so jumping into the build, before I even get into the gear and the weapons and everything, this is a rough build draft. We still have quite a bit of leveling to do on both the spear and the void gauntlet, but especially the void gauntlet. There's quite a few passes I have left to get to really make the weapon shine. But this is kind of how I get an idea for if builds are even worth putting the time into to farm and play. If it's viable before you're able to min-max the build, that's where I kind of feel you know, it's in a good place. But I've been trying to make a spear build for quite a long time. The spear is a really fun weapon, and it got buffed this patch, but alone it isn't really able to do the job that I feel the weapon is built around, which is stun locking people. You have quite a few cooldown reduction passives in the spear tree, which allows you to get a lot of your abilities back up quite often. But the thing that I kind of felt spear lacked was damage and another CC outside of the spear CCs, because you do need some sort of movement, and I feel usually another stun to kind of chain into your spear stuns, because usually you're giving up one of your slots on spear to have some form of utility, and I kind of felt that that's the reason why you need to fill the gap with another weapon. But on top of that as well, it really needs damage, because the weapon doesn't really have enough damage by itself to you know, one combo somebody in a stun lock. So I decided to pair it with Void Gauntlet. Void Gauntlet is a very fun weapon. I've just been kind of waiting for the right thing to pair it with, and I feel it pairs with Spear really nicely. Not only can we chain the Void Scream into the Spear stuns to get a really beautiful looking combo, the weapons synergize really well. As I mentioned already, we can chain the Scream into these stuns, but the thing that Void Gauntlet really provides is the defensive aspect that Spear is missing because it has nothing to give you either movement or any defensive abilities or perks. But it also has a lot of tools to help synergize with the Impaler ultimate. Exploited weakness is one of the ways I feel is the only way to get enough damage on Spear to kind of one combo a lot of people who are not in like full heavy armor. And the way that I kind of went about doing that was putting together a couple of perks. So Void Gauntlet is going to do a lot of that job for you. As you saw in the beginning clips there, we have it allows us to put together combos really nicely, but on top of that, we're applying quite a few debuffs during that. So Orb is going to apply Rend, which one increases their damage, but also just has a debuff on them to help increase that Spear ultimate. But this is a skill shot, and it is quite a bit harder to land. So I'm gonna kind of go into more of the more reliable abilities to land that have debuffs. So Scream is gonna give you 2 debuffs. It's gonna root them, which is 1. We are in medium armor, so it's gonna root them for at least 2 and a bit, and then if you have them below half health, it's gonna root them for a little bit longer, which gives us enough time to finish the combo. But on top of that, when we Scream somebody, we're putting disease on them. So we are getting 2 debuffs from Scream, and then Oblivion here is applying Weaken. So these 2 abilities alone is usually enough to fully proc that ultimate. But it's not always going to be the case where you have both of these up to combo somebody. So Orb is another way that you can apply Rend, which is another debuff. And we have Skewer, which one applies a debuff, which not only applies bleed, but increases our crit chance while they're bleeding, which helps out a lot, but it kind of acts as the utility skill on the build. Like I mentioned, Spear has no movement, and Skewers kind of be the only thing that chains with our dodges to help us get out of situations and start combos. So that's kind of how the offensive portion of the build works. And then, as I also mentioned, Void Gauntlet adds a lot of defensive utility to the build as well. So if you take a look at how some of these abilities work, Orb of Decay is going to be one of the really big ones to help keep you sustained, with addition to some of the passives. So we have Orb of Decay, which adds a really small burst heal, but the main thing we want from it is the heal over time. The heal over time is going to scale with our ill-gotten gain. If you don't have this, you should 100% have this already. There should be a ton of up on YouTube of where to get this earring, but I would 100% recommend having this on like pretty much any build you're running. But we do get a constant regeneration buff from that, which stacks with our Orb of Decay and our food. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like, our regen is pretty decent with just the passive food buff and our ill-gotten gain, but we can kind of increase that when we go ahead and eat some food. You see we regen health really, really quickly, and then that compounds when you go ahead and you use it with the orb. And you see it's even hard for me to lower my health here with the food buff active, but you see once we get that orb going and the food, it is quite a bit of regen that you can end up stacking on this build. That combined with, you know, a regen potion, which is going to give you a ton, you can essentially just, as long as you're able to dodge abilities and keep your movement up, you can regen almost all of your health while keeping your movement up and setting up combos. Now, taking a look at the attributes really quickly and then the gear. This is the stat setup that I'm currently running right now. As I mentioned, we are in medium armor, so I felt it was going to be okay to drop the 150 con here, and both Spear and Void Gauntlet are kind of lacking a little bit of damage, so I wanted to get as much damage as I could. So we decided to go ahead and push for 150 and 200, and both of these passives are going to be crucial to our survival on the build. We get the dodge cost reduction, which is going to help out tremendously to keep us mobile and iframing. And then the 200 int passive is going to give us mana after each dodge, which is going to help us sustain during those costly Void Gauntlet abilities. But aside from that, it's just to get as much damage as we can. The dex is going to help get a lot of the base damage up on the spear, and then we have a Void gem in there with 200 inch. So that's how we were able to kind of push the spear kind of as far as I could get it with this hybrid setup. Now, taking a look at the gear really quickly, as I mentioned, I don't really have anything min-maxed yet. I was just kind of throwing things together to kind of get a feel for the build. Keen Volt Kick is something that I picked up. Nullifying Oblivion is really nice as well. And Diminishing Orb is nice. It's not really needed. But the one that I would say is probably a must to have on the build is definitely going to be this one here, just to guarantee not only a disease on your opponent to reduce their healing, but just to guarantee another debuff to buff our spear damage. And then I've gone for a divine amulet here, which is going to really boost our incoming healing, which is how you saw we're able to regen so much health. And then for the ring, I've gone for Keen Awareness because crit is big on this build. Not only is it going to help our damage for our spear, which is pretty obvious, but Void Gauntlet benefits a ton from crits. You heal on every single crit, which has no cooldown, which is insane. You get 10% cooldown reduction on all your abilities on every single crit, which is insane. And then we also get a little bit more, so we can stack it to keep our heals and our cooldowns up on this weapon. But yeah, that's kind of the rough gear setup right now. As I mentioned, once I kind of get this a little bit more progressed and get things more min-maxed, I'll put out another video. But that's it for the gear / attribute portion, and let's get into the PvP. Alrighty, so before we jump into the juicy 1v1 wombo combos, I wanted to talk about outnumbered fighting really quickly, because while 1v1s and more even fights like 2v2s and stuff like that are kind of where this build shines, outnumbered fighting or 1vxing is also one of the ways that I really enjoy playing, and it's something that I wanted to try and achieve on this build. And before we even get into your matchups, like the builds that you're fighting against in the outnumbered fights, because that is going to really heavily determine the outcome of the fight. Being that we are not using rapier and we don't have a lot of the escape options and iframe options that weapon does, you essentially have to play perfectly when you're on the defensive, and that's with your dodges, I mean. So depending on the matchups of people you're fighting against, it's kind of one of those situations where if you get caught by a hard CC, you're pretty much dead. And then when it comes to fighting multiple Great Axe users, it becomes very, very hard to try and deal with those kinds of fights. But as you can see in the clip in the background here, we took a lot of damage from quite a few players here, and we did a very, very good job of evading, popping our regen, pushing, and getting that heal proc off from our orb. And even after we got these players around the corner here, we're doing a really, really good job of avoiding a lot of their abilities and landing stuns. But as you can see there, the second that we commit to an ability, we end up getting taken out by the double grab well there. So part of it is matchups, part of it is leveling up the weapons, because as you saw earlier, I don't even have either of these weapons maxed out yet. But the main thing comes down to honestly practice on the build. I'm still trying to figure out optimal combos and different ways I can take certain situations, and it's going to be something that I'm definitely going to be working on. But we have another little 3v1 here with a bow player and 2 hammer players, but nobody is running a grid axe, which is going to help us quite a bit here. But we are just dodging back and keeping some space while applying some debuffs. We do get caught with a hammer stun there, but we dodge around, land a vault kick, throw down our oblivion, and land a scream and sweep on both players. Put in a bit of damage there on one of the hammer players, so he's down to about half with some dots on him there. We throw out the orb to get our heal regen. Throw out the sweep there to catch the light armor bow player who just kind of walks in front of us there. And we unfortunately do end up getting a little bit of help here. We finish off the second player there with the scream, but I 100% feel we would have had this fight here, because when it comes to single target stuns like hammer, spear, and bow, it's a much more manageable fight because you can much more easily dodge around those with your medium armor dodge roll, but still a very, very good fight nonetheless. But yeah, like I mentioned, fights where you're not the sole targets and in kind of more 1v1 situations is going to be where this build really, really shines here. You see this healer doesn't really have his attention onto us. We land the vault kick and he's pretty much dead from there. We land the scream, go into the sweep, and we put a ton of damage into him. And I'm kind of just running on the outskirts here to find some targets here, and I see a rifleman just kind of sitting out there in the open. So we run just outside of his vision, throw out the orb to get the Ren debuff going on him, try to go ahead and land that bleed debuff, land the vault kick into his parry, unfortunately, throw down every single debuff, and we get the full combo off there for a clean kill. One of the things that I really like about this build is, unlike Rapier, you have a reliable damage combo, assuming you're able to land one of your stuns. You see we get hit pretty hard by a bow player and a brute here, and I kind of retreat a little bit, get the regen going on our orb, and we get a little bit of food, which brings us pretty much back to full health. But this player is still chasing us here, and we line up the vault kick for right when the brute despawns. And like I said, landing that first stun pretty much means death, or pretty heavily turns the fight in a lot of situations, because it's honestly quite a bit of time that you're stunned for and just taking damage. Unless you're running a really, really heavy tanky setup, it's really going to be the only situation where you're kind of able to just take that full combo and not be phased by it. But usually in that case, you're not doing damage yourself. So it's definitely a really, really strong 1v1 build for sure. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's still a pretty rough draft because we have to level up the weapons and get our gear in order. But honestly, it's usually situations like this where I can kind of feel like a build is worth putting the time into farm and play. If it's viable before you max out the weapons and get your build min-maxed, then that's when it's going to be, I feel, competitive once you actually get everything put together. But as I kind of level it up and get more practice in, I will be updating and putting out more videos. If you have any questions or anything, please don't hesitate to ask and leave it in the comments. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.